and I... No. Please leave the room if this will...
You've seen the Iceberg videos before, but not like this. We're diving through some of the most terrifying footage ever caught on camera, and each one is more disturbing than the last. From eerie sightings to footage nobody's been able to explain, this is where strange turns to horrifying. Because once you've hit level 5, you can't unsee what's coming. Let's start at the surface. Level 1. Steve Irwin death footage, unreleased and witnessed. You might spend your whole life close to wildlife, but does that mean that you're safe from them? Or if one day they turn on you, would it feel like a betrayal to you? If yes, we should call what happened to Steve Irwin a nightmare. Steve Irwin, a father of 2 and a fearless wildlife expert, loved around the world, was floating in calm, chest-deep water. No heavy scuba gear, just snorkeling, filming another underwater scene for a documentary called Ocean's Deadliest. He wasn't wrestling crocodiles or dodging snake bites this time. He was gliding slowly above a stingray, hoping to capture it swimming away on camera. The stingray wasn't moving, it lied still on the ocean floor. But in a flash, everything changed. The stingray, about 2 meters wide, suddenly lifted its front and its sharp tail whipped up violently. It stabbed Steve not once, but again and again. The strikes were fast, powerful, and deadly. Imagine the horror and pain in this moment. You're just shooting without creating any disturbance, and then in the next moment, a barb of a stingray goes directly deep into your chest, fatally. But Steve didn't scream, he didn't panic, he reached down and pulled the barb out with his own hands. Blood gushed through the water. The crew rushed to him, grabbing his body and trying to keep him afloat. They didn't know how bad it was. Even Steve thought it might just be a punctured lung, but the stingray's barb had done far worse. It had pierced through his chest wall and gone straight into his heart. The camera recorded everything, but that footage has never been shown to the world. Those who were there say it's one of the most heartbreaking things ever filmed. They pulled him back onto the boat, began CPR, and raced to the nearest island, Low Island. The medical staff was already there, but when Steve arrived, it was too late. He was dead already. It was September 4th, 2006, and by that time, he was only 44. A father, a husband, and a friend to animals. The stingray may have mistaken Steve's shadow for a predator like a tiger shark. It wasn't an attack out of aggression, it was fear. Stingrays usually avoid humans. They're quiet, gentle creatures. But when they feel threatened, their tail becomes a weapon, like a razor-sharp venomous spear. Steve knew that better than anyone, but he couldn't predict that moment. Probably that's why it said that, in the end, what you love kills you. What do you think? Level 2, Zion National Park Flash Flood. When you venture into the forest, it's not always the wild animals that you should fear. Sometimes you might have to look death in the eyes in the most unexpected ways possible. It was a normal day in Zion National Park on September 14th, 2015. A group was hiking through a narrow canyon, joking and carefully walking between the tall stone walls, their footsteps echoing off of the rock. But within a minute, everything changed. Wind slammed into them like a punch. Then came the hail, sharp as glass, and then the rain, hard, fast, and nonstop. Water poured in from all sides like someone had turned on a giant tap above their heads. And just like that, the dry canyon floor turned into a river. A GoPro camera strapped to Jordan Birnbaum's head caught every second of it. He and his girlfriend were part of the group, caught in the middle of what no one saw coming. It felt like at first, the ground shook like thunder. And before you could scream, a force of muddy water came crashing down, snatching your legs, pulling you under, and spinning you like a rag doll as rocks and branches slammed into your body violently. There was no way back. The only choice was to go down, which only meant running into a slippery trail with cliffs on one side and floodwater rising on the other. Jordan and his girlfriend pressed themselves against the canyon wall, trying to stay upright, but the wind was howling. The sound of water crashing around them was deafening. They were all in survival mode. So without thinking much, they ran, over rocks, through waterfalls, and across a river that hadn't been there minutes ago. Imagine a big wave of water with random boulders coming after you, and you're simply running for your life as fast as possible. For 7 long minutes, they fought to stay ahead of the water, and somehow they made it out. But 7 others didn't. 6 of them were part of a local hiking club from Southern California. They had come out for a day of peace and adventure. This was the last photo the group ever took together, smiling, hopeful, and ready for a good day. But Jordan knew the second the clouds turned heavy that this wasn't going to end well. And what no one can answer is the hardest part of all. Why didn't anyone warn them? But we don't want to make that mistake. That's why we have a warning for you. We can only dive deeper into this iceberg if you hit that subscribe button. Why? Because we make these videos to entertain you, thrill you, and chill you, and occasionally make you paranoid in the most fun way possible. So please hit that subscribe and we'll dive deeper into this iceberg. Level 3, the Uvalde school shooting surveillance. What would you do if your child was trapped behind a door and you saw armed officers just standing outside doing nothing? What kind of fear stops a man with a gun from saving a bleeding child? Because on May 24th, 2022, in Uvalde, Texas, 19 children and 2 teachers were inside of a classroom. Not because help never came, but because it stood right outside the door like a statue for more than an hour. That day, Salvador Ramos, an ex-student, walked into the school holding an AR-15. He was just 18 years old then. At 11:33 a.m., he turned a corner and looked out into the hallway. Just a moment later, loud and rapid gunshots came non-stop that turned the hallway into a war zone. Think about it. You're walking down the hall of a school and suddenly caught into a shootout. Within 3 minutes, police arrived and ran toward the sound of gunfire, but within seconds, bullets flew back at them as well. Some of them were hit, and they simply backed off. After that, the school went completely silent. Inside, children were still alive, still trapped, and calling for help. But outside, the officers stood still. None of them dared to move in. The security footage speeds up, and what you're about to see next is very disturbing. Many officers kept arriving. Some of them are holding rifles, and some of them carry big protective shields. At 12:21 p.m., over 10 of them stand in a line right outside the classroom door. They're fully armed, but still no one opens the door. Meanwhile, inside the room, the gunman is still there, and so are the Some of them have already been shot, some were still breathing, and some were whispering for help into 911 calls. But no help came. Later, watching this CCTV footage, even the governor admitted that it was a failure by law enforcement, a failure to act, and a failure that cost lives. Finally, when it's 12:30 p.m., the shooter has been inside for almost an hour, and still the officers were waiting. One of them walked past a hand sanitizer dispenser in the hallway. He casually stopped, pumped, and rubbed his hands. That's it. That's what he did, while kids were bleeding behind the door. When parents saw that footage, all of them had one question. How did he have time to clean his hands, but not the courage to save their children? Finally, at 12:50 p.m., after 77 long minutes, the shooter was shot and killed. But by then, total of 21 bodies were piled up in the school. Obviously, the gunshots of the killer were unexpected and loud, but what was louder was the silence of the armed police force waiting outside. Can anyone explain why they didn't go in? Chloe Ayling kidnap footage. You shouldn't trust everyone who promises you a job or an assignment, especially if you have to relocate, because it might lead you into a trap. That's exactly what happened to the beautiful young model Chloe Ayling in July of 2017. She was handcuffed and shoved into a suitcase like a piece of luggage after she had flown from Milan, Italy, for what she thought was a fashion shoot. But within minutes of arriving at the studio, everything went black. Just imagine you show up for work, and the next thing you know, you're waking up, tied up in the trunk of a car, struggling to breathe. That's exactly what happened to her. Her heart was racing, her limbs were numb, and the man driving the car wasn't a photographer, he was her kidnapper. This was not a random crime, but a planned one. A few months earlier, her agent, Phil Green, who was also a part-time DJ, had received a modeling offer for Chloe from someone calling himself Andre Lazio. The first shoot in Paris had been canceled, but now, in July of 2017, this man offered another one in Milan. Everything seemed fine, the flights were booked and the hotels were arranged. But what Chloe didn't know was that Andre Lazio was actually a 30-year-old Polish computer geek named Łukasz Herba, who had no interest in fashion. He had one goal: to kidnap her and sell her online. Can you imagine that? Someone could kidnap you and sell you online just like that, which is disturbingly similar to how people were bought and sold in the days of slavery. After Chloe disappeared, her mother panicked. She hadn't come home, and instead her agent got a chilling email from someone calling himself MD. It demanded 300,000 euros, or Chloe would be sold as a on the dark web in 4 days. It claimed to be from a criminal group called the Black Death. Italian police rushed to the fake studio address. They found some of Chloe's clothes, but no sign of Chloe herself. Days passed, and no trace of her came. But then, out of nowhere, on July 17th, Chloe walked into the British consulate in Milan. But she wasn't alone. Her kidnapper was with her. CCTV footage showed them walking side by side through the streets, calmly, smiling even. People started to ask, was this really a kidnapping, or was it a publicity stunt planned by Chloe herself? But in court, the truth began to surface. Herba had injected her with ketamine, a strong sedative, and he kept her locked in a house near Turin. He filmed her and threatened her, and then he tried to play the good guy, claiming he fell in love and was helping her become famous by creating a scandal. In the end, he was sentenced to almost 17 years. His brother Michał, who helped in the plan, also went to prison. But for Chloe, the worst part wasn't being kidnapped. It was what came after. Because even when she was free, no one believed her story. Did you? Number 7, the Columbine basement tapes and CCTV. How disturbing is this thought that maybe someone or some group you sit next to in your office cubicle or even classroom are quietly planning to kill you? While it's unlikely, this is not impossible either. At least the Columbine basement tapes found in April 20th, 1999 says so. The footage is grainy, but the horror is crystal clear. 2 teenage boys dressed in black trench coats walk calmly through a school cafeteria, guns in hand, eyes cold as if they're on a mission. Moments earlier, they had tried to blow up the entire school with homemade propane bombs. If those bombs had worked, hundreds of students eating lunch would have been torn apart. But something failed, the timers didn't go off, and so the plan had changed. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, just both 17, didn't flinch. With loaded guns and bags full of explosives, they walked towards the school's west entrance at 11:19 a.m. The first victims were outside, Rachel Scott, who was shot dead instantly, and her friend Richard Castaldo, who was left paralyzed. Then they moved fast, down a staircase, firing at anyone that moved. Daniel Rohrbach collapsed. Lance Kirkland was shot in the face, and Sean Graves tried to crawl away. It's like you're casually walking down the school lobby, and then suddenly some random bullets pierce you fatally. Inside the school, chaos was exploding, just as the bombs had failed to. William Dave Sanders, a beloved teacher, saw the shooters and did what few adults would have the courage to do. He ran through the halls, shouting at students to run, to hide, to live. As a result, he took a bullet in the back while saving others. He bled out slowly in a classroom, students trying desperately to keep him alive. In the cafeteria, security cameras caught the shooters checking their bombs again. Still no explosions. So they moved on. Outside, a police deputy fired at them but missed. It was like trying to stop a storm with a stone. Then came the library. At 11:29 a.m., they walked in and unleashed hell in the library. 52 people were inside, hoping to be overlooked. But Harris and Klebold hunted them down. Afterwards, they laughed and they mocked. They even asked teens if they believed in God before pulling the trigger. 7 minutes later, 10 people were dead. Patrick Ireland had been shot in the head. He lay still, pretending to be dead. Craig Scott hid under a table beside the bodies of his friends. But the killers didn't stop yet. They left the library briefly, tried again to detonate their bombs by shooting at them, and even lit one with a Molotov cocktail. A small fire sparked, but the sprinklers had put it out. Still, they weren't finished. At exactly 12:08 p.m., they returned to the library, where the floor was now soaked in blood. Without a word, they sat down. Harris used his shotgun. Klebold used his handgun. And the final 2 shots echoed through the broken school. But the story doesn't end there, because after the bodies were removed and the blood was scrubbed away, investigators found something else. A series of tapes, journals, handwritten plans, dark fantasies, and chilling confessions. And there was one last video, a goodbye, recorded in a basement. What they said shook even the strongest FBI agents to their core. The tape was never made public, but their motive was a mix of hatred, revenge fantasies, and a desire for infamy. All they wanted was to punish a world that they felt had wronged them and leave behind a legacy of fear. We don't know what kind of horror or trauma happened to them, but do you think it justifies their actions? Level 4. The Las Vegas mass shooting. Are you fond of open-air concerts? Then beware of this footage, because it will affect you so badly that you will always think twice before going to any concert in the future. It was a perfect night on October 1st, 2017, with a clear sky, music blasting, and lights dancing off of cowboy boots and beer cups. Over 22,000 people had gathered to sing, cheer, and lose themselves in country music. On stage, Jason Aldean strummed his guitar, and the crowd swaying with him, until a happened. A sound of gunfire came. Some turned their heads, some ducked, some laughed nervously thinking it was fireworks, but then came the desperate screams. Someone fell, and then another. Panic rippled like a shockwave. The crowd started running here and there, and people hitting the ground, others frozen, screaming for help. From the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, Stephen Paddock had broken 2 windows in his suite. He was firing down on the crowd from 490 yards away, almost 5 football fields. He had set up 2 rooms connected, both facing the concert. Inside were 24 guns, many fitted with bump stocks, devices that made his semi-automatic rifles shoot almost as fast as machine guns. He'd carried bags and bags of weapons to his suite over several days, but nobody suspected a thing. Between 10:05 and 10:15 p.m., he fired over 1,000 bullets. Some were aimed at the crowd, others at a jet fuel tank near the airport. 2 bullets hit it, and one even pierced the tank, but the fuel didn't explode, luckily. The concert area, just 15 acres, was surrounded by fences, and people were trapped. It's like you are trapped inside of an open ground and someone is shooting you rampantly from afar. Security guard Jesus Campos had gone to the 32nd floor minutes before the attack. He was shot in the leg through the hotel room door. Another employee, Stephen Schuck, was warned by Campos just in time and called for help. But by the time the police reached the room, the shooting had stopped. At 11:20 p.m., more than an hour later, police blew open the door. Inside, they only found Paddock's dead body. After the mass killing, he took his own life. Surrounding him were rifles, ammunition, and cameras he'd set up in the hallway to watch for anyone coming. He left no note and no message. This was the deadliest mass shooting by a single gunman in American history. 60 people killed, over 400 shot, and more than 800 injured in the stampede. And still, no one could explain why. Number 9. The burning Thich Quang Duc. You've never seen anything more disturbing than this. It's not only me saying this, but President John F. Kennedy admitted it too. In his words, no news picture in history has generated so much emotion around the world as that one. All you'd see is a man sitting cross-legged in the middle of a busy street in Saigon, wrapped in his saffron robes like a candle waiting for a spark. And in a moment, he set himself on raging fire, publicly. Thang Duc took out a string of wooden prayer beads and whispered, Nam Mo A Di Da Fat. And then he struck the match. The flames swallowed him instantly. But he didn't scream. He didn't even flinch at all, unlike any normal human being caught on fire would do. This was kind of unbelievable and inhumane to see. Around him, people wailed and collapsed in horror. Policemen dropped to their knees. Journalists froze, unable to lift their cameras. But in the center of it all, he sat like stone, burning alive. Just imagine how horrifying it would be to watch someone burn alive, his skin and flesh melting away, slowly revealing a blackened, charred skull underneath. Only a few knew that this was coming. The day before, American reporters had received a vague message. Something important will happen tomorrow. Most ignored it. But journalist Malcolm Brown showed up and captured the photo that would shock the planet. But Quang Duc's fire was more than a protest. In 1963, South Vietnam was burning. Though the country was 90% Buddhist, President Ngo Dinh Diem, a Catholic, treated Buddhists as second class. Catholic officers were promoted, Buddhist villages were denied food unless they converted, pagodas were destroyed, and when Buddhists dared to fly their flag on Buddha's birthday, the government forces opened fire, killing 9 peaceful demonstrators. Diem blamed the Viet Cong for this, and so the monks had to interfere. Finally, on the morning of June 11, 1963, Quang Duc led the march. Around 350 monks and nuns walked with him. He was offered a substitute, but refused. By the time his body finally collapsed backward 10 minutes later, nothing but ash remained, except for one thing, his heart. It is said that his heart never burned, and for that reason they called it holy and a symbol of compassion. But what came next wasn't peace. It was the beginning of something much darker. It intensified global outrage and internal unrest, eventually leading to political upheaval in South Vietnam. And this haunting footage leaves us with one brutal question. Did he die like this for nothing? Number 10. The Last Dive of Yuri Lipsky. Imagine seeing someone whose life is slowly slipping away right in front of your eyes, but you can't do anything because you're seeing a video clip and that person is already dead. Yes, at first, it was just heavy breathing and a quiet hum from his equipment, but then the water lit up around him, deep blue, endless. Yuri Lipsky, only 22, a diving instructor from Russia, was diving into Egypt's Blue Hole, one of the most dangerous underwater sinkholes on Earth. Divers feared it and called it the Diver's Cemetery. But Yuri went in alone, carrying a camera on his helmet. He wanted to film the dive, but what he ended up filming was his own death. The camera shows him dropping fast, way too fast. Imagine jumping out of a plane and forgetting the parachute. That's what this looked like underwater. At first, his breathing is steady, but then you hear it, faster and louder. It clearly means that something's wrong. He sinks past 50 meters, and then 70, and then 90. This was past the point where your body can think straight. But he kept going. At 115 meters, Yuri stops. Not by choice, his body just can't go anymore. When he lands on the seafloor, the panic hits. He tries to inflate his diving vest, the thing that should help lift him back up, but it's not working. His arms move quickly and clumsily. He's confused. His brain isn't working right. That's because of something called nitrogen narcosis. This is what happens when you breathe too much normal air too deep underwater. You start to feel like you're drunk, you start to hallucinate things, and you forget how to think straight. You feel extreme anxiety and you panic. And then Yuri does the worst thing possible. He takes out his mouthpiece. That was his only link to air. But he just pulls it out. Slowly, you can see the life drain out of him. And the camera keeps rolling. There's no shouting, no bubbles, just a slow, terrifying silence. The next day, on April 29th, 2000, a famous deep-sea diver named Tarek Omar went down to bring Yuri's body back. He had warned Yuri twice not to do the dive, but Yuri didn't listen. On the seafloor, Tarek found Yuri's camera, still attached, still working, even though it wasn't made for those depths. Tarek gave everything back to Yuri's mother. She asked to see what was on the camera, and she watched all of it. Tarek later said that he wished that he had destroyed the tape underwater, because once you see something like that, it stays with you, and it haunts you forever. Level 5. Luca Magnotta hallway footage. Violence is indeed scary, but what's scarier is when someone commits violence and still stays calm, and keeps smiling with a cold stare in their eyes. That is pure evil, and beyond any emotion, logic, humanity, and redemption. For that reason, this footage, in which you won't see any violence or bloodshed, is still considered one of the most bone-chilling footages ever. This is Luca Magnotta walking down the hallway like it was just any other day. He pulled a heavy suitcase behind him with a calm face. He even paused in front of a mirror, fixed his hair, adjusted his jacket, and walked on. But inside that suitcase were the body parts of Jun Lin. Magnotta had just filmed one of Canada's most disturbing murders, and now, with a body chopped into pieces and stuffed into bags, he walked away without a trace of panic. That's what made it so terrifying. Not the blood, not the violence, but the calm. Jun Lin was a 33-year-old student from Wuhan, China. He had moved to Canada in 2010, dreaming of a better life. He studied computer engineering at Concordia University in Montreal and worked part-time at a convenience store. Jun was quiet, respectful, and kept to himself. But he was also carrying a secret. He was gay. Back in China, his family didn't even know. They had even met his boyfriend, but still pressured him to marry a woman. That pressure had ended his relationship, and now Jun was lonely, trying to meet new people online. That's how he found Magnotta, through a Craigslist ad about bondage and On May 24th, 2012, cameras captured Jun walking into Magnotta's apartment, but he had never come out. The next day, an 11-minute video appeared online. It showed a man tied to a bed, stabbed again and again. The killer used a screwdriver disguised as an ice pack and a kitchen knife. Then he cut the body apart. He used a severed arm for unspeakable acts. He fed flesh to a dog. He played music in the background, True Faith by New Order. A poster of the old film Casablanca hung on the wall. It didn't look rushed. It looked planned, staged, like a disturbing horror movie. In the modern world, dating or having a one-night stand in this way isn't uncommon, but just imagine you're meeting someone at their place, hoping for love, and who you meet is simply a monster. waiting to mess with you in the most horrific ways possible. But the worst was still to come. Magnotta mailed June's body parts across all of Canada. A foot arrived in the Conservative Party's office. A hand reached at a school. Wrapped in pink tissue paper, some packages came with twisted notes. For example, one note said, "The police will need dental records to identify you." And Luca, he had already booked a flight to Paris. Since Interpol marked him as wanted, by June 2012 he was finally arrested. But killing June Lin wasn't the only crime that he committed. He'd also filmed and uploaded an extremely disturbing video of suffocating two kids inside of a plastic bag. However, that's another thrilling story for another video. Number 12. Matthew Hoffman tree stump case. The floor was covered in leaves, not just a few, huge piles of them, dry, brown, and crackling under every step, stacked up to the knees in every room. The walls were lined with plastic bags stuffed with even more leaves. In the bathroom alone, there was over 100 bags. Leaves were everywhere, on the bed, inside the freezer, and even underneath a frightened little girl. When the police broke into Matthew Hoffman's house in Mount Vernon, Ohio, they didn't just find a crime scene, they stepped into a living nightmare. And then, in the middle of that mess, they saw her. She was 13-year-old Sarah Maynard, tied up, lying on a bed made of leaves, alive, but barely speaking. Her eyes were wide open, but her voice had gone quiet. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just lay there, as if waiting to be forgotten. 4 days earlier, her entire life had been torn apart. Matthew Hoffman wasn't a stranger, he was a tree trimmer. He was quiet, maybe a little weird, but had no job and no friends. But this man broke into Sarah's house on November 10th, 2010, planning to rob it. But her mom, Tina Herman, came home early. She wasn't alone. Even her best friend, Stephanie Sprang, walked in moments later. And then Hoffman panicked. He attacked them both. He said he didn't mean to kill, but that didn't stop him from stabbing them until they stopped moving. And then came the worst part. Sarah and her little brother, 11-year-old Cody, came home from school. They opened the door and walked straight into the bloodbath. Hoffman grabbed them too. He killed Cody on the spot, but decided to keep Sarah alive. Why? He never gave a real answer. He just said that he thought that he could control her. He took all three bodies, Tina, Cody, and Stephanie, cut them into pieces, stuffed them into garbage bags, and drove them out to a forest preserve. There, he found a hollow tree, which was big enough to hide stuff inside. That's where he put them. And Sarah, she was taken to his home, tied up in the basement, and left to lie on a bed of leaves. He fed her cereal with spoiled milk, he let her take a shower, and then he assaulted her. He made her feel like she wasn't a person anymore. Think about it. Just a 13-year-old girl who had to get through so much horror back to back. She came home to see both of her mom and best friend killed, and then she watched her brother being killed. Then she got herself kidnapped and assaulted like an animal. Hoffman's obsession with trees wasn't just a hobby. A psychologist said that it was what wild animals do. They kill and then cover their prey with leaves or dirt. Hoffman was trying to camouflage death. The only reason police found him is because of a receipt. He left a bag from a local store in Tina's garage. Cops pulled the store's camera footage and saw Hoffman in it, wearing the same shirt he was caught in later. That led him to his house, and that's where they found Sarah. Sarah later said that the hardest part wasn't just losing her family, it was realizing that she'd been lying on top of their bodies in the car during the ride to Hoffman's house. So when the cops stepped into that strange house full of leaves, they didn't know what they were looking at. But what they found was worse than anything they had imagined. Level 6. Anthony Sewell, House Discovery. A woman jumped off a second-story window and hit the ground hard. Broken and bleeding, but that fall saved her life. Because inside that house at 12205 Imperial Avenue lived Anthony Sewell, who wasn't just a regular guy. He was hiding a horror so big, so disturbing, that if you were there, you'd also think that jumping out the window might be a safer option than staying inside. When officers arrived, they were hit by a smell so foul they almost threw up on the spot. Their body cameras captured everything. There was trash everywhere, blood on the walls, rotting food, and a stench so thick, it felt like it could choke you. As they moved deeper into the house, they found something even worse. 2 dead bodies lying out in the open. There were more bodies hidden, some in crawl spaces, others were buried in shallow graves in the yard. In total, they found 11 bodies. Every single one of them was a woman, and all had gone missing between 2007 and 2009. Sowell had once served in the Marines, he'd worn the uniform, followed orders, and lived a disciplined life. But after leaving the military, something inside him snapped. He lost his job, he started drinking heavily, and then the assaults began. In 1989, he was convicted of attempted rape and spent 15 years in prison. When he got out in 2005, he moved back into his mother's old home on Imperial Avenue. By 2007, he was living alone. He would invite women over, many of them struggling with addiction, offering them beer, shelter, and a place to sleep. But over time, those women stopped leaving. His first known victim was Crystal Dozier. She was buried in the backyard. Then came Tashana Culver, strangled in 2008. Leandra Long was just 25, only her head was ever found. Tanya Carmichael disappeared that same year. Her daughter reported her missing, but police brushed it off, saying she'd probably return. The neighborhood had complained for years about a terrible smell. Police did nothing. Everyone thought it was coming from Ray's sausage shop nearby. Sowell may have even used their dumpster to hide evidence. And Sowell kept on killing. Then came October of 2009, when a woman accused him of rape. Detectives visited his house but didn't go inside. They'd assumed that the stench was still from the sausage factory. 9 days later, on September 22, 2009, that woman, Latrunda Billups, jumped from his window. That was the wake-up call. When police finally entered with a search warrant, Sowell was gone. He was caught 2 days later, just a mile away. The victims were all black women. Most had faced tough lives: poverty, addiction, broken homes. Under questioning, Sowell tried to play confused, but he eventually confessed. He was sentenced to death in 2011, but died of natural causes in prison in 2021. The house on Imperial Avenue, it was torn down in 2010. People say the ground still holds the pain of what happened there. Indeed, anyone who ever found out about it would never want to live there or start a business. Would you? Number 14. Dina Petrovic Maniacs. 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. You may have heard of Texas Chainsaw or watched its films. There, the serial killer Leatherface used to kill people for sadistic fun. But killing for fun was a real thing back in 2007 in Ukraine, which touched the most grotesque level possible, involving 3 monsters. In the recorded disturbing footage, a man lies on the ground, his chest slowly rising and falling. He's bleeding badly. His eyes dart upward, desperate, pleading. Not with words, but with something more primal. The sound, wet, blunt, bone-crushing. Because a hammer is slamming down again and again. This was not a horror movie, neither was it staged. This was real, and someone recorded it, laughing. His name was Sergei Yatsenko, a 48-year-old man just trying to survive his days. He'd battled cancer, endured surgeries, and was trying to live quietly. But on that day in July 2007, he became a victim of something that should never have existed: evil for the sake of evil. The video they recorded, later titled 3 Guys, 1 Hammer, exploded across the darkest corners of the internet. Found on a discarded flash drive, it showed 2 teenagers from Ukraine, Viktor Sayenko and Igor Saprunyik, Sergei with a hammer and a screwdriver. They laughed as they took his life. They filmed it as if it were a prank. The video is widely considered one of the most disturbing ever caught on tape, not because it was graphic, because indeed it was, but because it gave us a clear, raw, and unfiltered look into the minds of sadists who wore the faces of teenagers. But what many didn't know is that Sergei was not their first victim. Before that horrifying video, the group had already begun a spree. What started as robberies, simple, opportunistic thefts, evolved into something far darker. Victims were chosen at random. A man walking home, a woman riding a bike, or a child. It could be anybody. One by one, they were taken, their lives ending in the blink of an eye, all for sport. And Viktor and Igor, they documented everything. There was a third boy as well, Alexander Hanza, who didn't kill, but he helped in the robberies. He served just 9 years. Then he walked free, got married, had kids, and a life. And a fourth one, Daniela Klopp, vanished completely. He flipped on the others and gave police what they needed, and thanks to a wealthy family and connections, he slipped out of the spotlight. Some say to Germany. No charges stuck to him, no prison either. But let's go back to the hammer, the camera, the scream. That video was enough. 21 people are confirmed dead at the hands of this teen duo, maybe more. Only one video was released, but rumors suggest many were filmed, locked away forever by authorities. Victor and Igor were sentenced to life back in 2009, but the twist is that during wartime, things often change. A new law passed recently in Ukraine allows inmates to serve in the military in exchange for lighter sentences. So did they join the military and get out? If not, here's where it gets chilling. Over 30 prison facilities are now outside of Ukraine's control. In some cases, Russia has taken over. In others, the chaos of war has simply consumed them. And when a prison changes hands, when the guards leave, when the files vanish, so do the names. And that leads to the terrifying question, are these monsters still behind bars, or are they out there, untraceable, unseen, and armed? Because rumors have started to spread. Some say that one of them is dead, that Victor took his own life last year in prison. Others claim that it's a cover-up. Some swear that they've seen one of them on the battlefield, face hidden behind a soldier's mask. We're left with fragments, incomplete answers, and one horrifying possibility, that the men who once laughed while smashing skulls might be walking free. Maybe again, they're watching and waiting for their new prey. You. Level 7, Christchurch Mosque shooting a live stream. Any idea how far religious conflict can go? How ruthless and violent it can be? Those who know well about crusades might get it, but for others, this one is a chilling glimpse into the blood-soaked reality of what unfolded on March 15th, 2019 in Christchurch. A man drove up casually and slowly to a mosque. Inside, worshippers were bowing in prayer. It was quiet and peaceful, and then came a sound. Bang. A single gunshot tore through the silence. Screams followed. In seconds, peace turned to panic. People ran clumsily, and the man with the gun kept walking, calm and steady as if he had done this before. He was Brenton Tarrant, a 28-year-old man from Australia. He wore a camera on his helmet, live streaming every moment on Facebook. Like a video game, but it was a real incident with real people. He called it a mission. He had posted online just before the shooting saying he was going to attack the invaders. Along with the video, he shared a long letter of hate, blaming immigrants and Muslims for ruining the world. He called it the Great Replacement. Tarrant had moved to New Zealand in 2017 and started planning the attack years earlier. He studied maps, used drones to spy on the mosques, and learn prayer times. He got his guns legally and then covered them in white power symbols and the names of other attackers. He wanted people to remember him. He wanted to be seen as a symbol. After the first attack on Al Noor Mosque, where 44 people were killed, Tarrant drove to another mosque, the Linwood Islamic Center. But this time, someone fought back. Abdul Aziz, a father praying inside, grabbed the first thing that he saw, a credit card machine, and ran at the gunman. He dodged bullets and chased Tarrant away, saving many lives. Police finally stopped Tarrant when he was on his way to a third target. They rammed his car and they pulled him out. In court, he later admitted to killing 51 people and trying to kill 40 more. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of getting out, the first time that that's ever happened in New Zealand. But the horror didn't end there. The video of the attack spread online, and even though a few people saw it live, copies flooded the internet. The government made it illegal to share or even watch it. Still, the damage was done. And now, the question no one wants to ask still lingers. What if the next killer like Luca Magnotta, Anthony Sowell, or Brandon Tarrant is watching right now, waiting to strike, waiting to be the next chilling story on another video? If you're craving some more terrifying content, why not check out this video of the most terrifying Bigfoot encounter caught on camera?